today we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of a Wednesday walkabout, we're going to do a Wednesday talkabout. Let's talk about a few things that you guys ask me frequently because it's bitter cold out and I am definitely inside for the day. A lot of you have asked recently, how do I stay slim and how do I stay fit? I just had a pivotal birthday, so a lot of these topics are kind of front and center to me right now. Again, I am no expert. I'm just out there. We're all trying to figure it out together, but I do consider it garden related. So if you're not interested in this topic because it's not strictly gardening, then just go on to the next one. But if you are, I definitely think all of these tips about how to stay young as we are over 40, over 50, over 60, over 30 for that matter, are very pertinent, I think, to living a garden-inspired life. And I look at everything through a gardening lens, including my health and wellness practices and habits, and even my outlook on life. So I thought today it might be fun to talk about 5 things that I think keep you looking and acting young and youthful, and also make you feel more energized and enthusiastic as you get older, as I am definitely. So I'm going to just talk about 5 things that I've alluded to in the past, but this will concentrate them into 5 specific tips that you guys can share your thoughts with me about how you try to magnify and manifest these kinds of tips in your life. And of course, give me any of your own suggestions on how I might improve my quality of life going forward. So I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you a couple of stories related to each one of these things, because I am a questioner. And I just asked you my question of the day. Please make sure to respond and comment on what tips you have for me, but you guys know that I'm a questioner. And I try to figure things out, and I kind of try to deconstruct things. And that not only includes garden design and garden design tips and ways to be more efficient in the garden, but it also includes how I look at living your life and lifestyle tips and different personalities and things. So my number 1 is to, I think, look more youthful and appear younger and more energetic. Good posture and how you carry yourself is so important. And lately I told you that I am really trying to improve this in my own life. I've paired this with that. So when I walk through a door frame, I try to tell myself to stand up straighter. I've tried to start doing that a little bit more when I sit, because I tend to be a real sloucher, and that puts pressure on my lower back, which in my world is already pretty compromised. So I'm trying to tell myself, and I'm sure you can just hear your mom say, don't slouch, stand up taller. You know, I will sometimes tell my husband, stand up tall and you'll look, 20 pounds lighter, 10 years younger, or whatever. And believe me, it's something that I have to practice myself. Now, in terms of how I deconstructed this, let me tell you a really fun little story. And it's my meet and greet with Cary Grant. So many years ago, I was director of admissions at a local university here, and it was known for its School of Performing Arts. And parenthetically, nod Stewart, shout out to Stewart's daughter Julia, who is a scholarship student there in their music department. But they have a wonderful music and performing arts department, and because of that, they would always hold these big galas and money raisers and things. And for one of the guest appearances and guests at this kind of cocktail party that we had for him was Cary Grant, who at that point in time was probably in his upper 70s, maybe mid 70s, upper 70s. And let me tell you, the man was as elegant at that age as he was in his youth when he was still making a lot of movies and things. And I can remember looking at him and thinking, what is it about you that makes you look so attractive and so energized and so youthful. And actually, it was just all in the way he carried and moved himself. His posture was wonderful. He had ease getting up and out of chairs. He just seemed to move through a space very easily and seamlessly. And I'm sure it's because he was a physical actor and he worked on that over his entire life. He got started, I think, as a trapeze artist or in the circus or something of that nature. Stuart's mom is kind of going, really? Yes, he really started out doing a lot more physical comedy and things. And because of that, he was always attentive to how he carried himself. And of course, he's known for his elegant stature and posture. And I can remember deconstructing it at the time while I was also very much swooning and salivating over how gorgeous he was. I was in my 20s, he was in his 70s. It didn't make any difference. Every decade of women there was absolutely smitten with Cary Grant. So that is my number one tip: to look youthful and energetic, and that is be mindful of your posture and how you carry yourself. It costs nothing other than a constant reminder to ourselves to stand up and fly right. Now let's move on to the next one. Now, Stuart just asked me if I was holding this book as part of my second episode or second tip, and I wasn't, but I'm holding it because I wanted to remind you of this. My daughter-in-law got one of these for Christmas, and I looked at hers, and I immediately loved it and ordered one for myself. And it is a no recipe recipes cookbook. And what I love about it is it just tells you what ingredients go well together, but with no proportions. So if you're like Stuart and me, we tend to just cook by taste and by flavors, not necessarily by ingredient amounts. So you might want to check this out. Stuart, let's try to put an Amazon link. I also love the fact that it's just a really good looking book. Okay, so speaking of good looking and appearances and how you make a first impression, we've all heard that you never have a chance to make you never have a second chance to make a first impression. So I think first impressions are important, but more important, I think that paying attention to your appearance and to how you dress and carry yourself. I don't consider it vanity. I don't consider it affectation. I consider it as showing respect to yourself. And because when I put a little effort into making myself look more presentable and more stylish, then I feel better about myself. I like the fact that it's an exercise in creativity, putting together an ensemble, matching earrings. It's a little bolt of joy for me every day when I pick out my earrings. It helps me reuse, recycle, and repurpose what I have already got in my closet. Most of the time I'm working out in the garden, so even if I've got on something kind of nice, I don't care, because chances are it's not like it used to be back in olden times where you would literally wear out your clothing and you only had one good dress or one casual dress. Most of us are fortunate that we have a lot of things in our closet, and I take great joy in wearing those things in my closet, inside or out. And especially if it's, like I say, it's an exercise in creativity by putting together different colors and textures and proportions of things. Just as I like to do that in the garden and in garden design, I like to do that in my wardrobe as well. The other thing is, I think if you're going through a real downtime, it just gives you a little pepper-upper. There's been a number of times recently over the holidays when I just didn't feel very good. I was kind of sickly. And finally I decided, you need to pull yourself out of this. Get up, take a shower, wash your hair, put on some makeup, and it did make me feel better and more energized. I think it's also kind of respectful to the other people around you. I think it's kind of respectful to my husband and my children and people in my life if they think that I went to a little bit of effort for them. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to have a full face of makeup or expensive clothing. It just needs to look, whether you're dressed up or dressed down, as if you put a little bit of effort into it, as if you brushed your teeth and brushed your hair. And I think that's really important. It's also something that I put into a category of what I call things I have learned from delivering so many eulogies. I'm at a period in my life and I am at a position in my family where I have been called upon to deliver a number of eulogies for loved ones in my family. I am very proud to do it. It is an expression of love from me to them, but also to my loved ones who are still surviving. And what I have found is, as I write the eulogies about the people, a lot of times, in addition to their deeper qualities about how kind and loving they were, how smart they were, or how creative they were, there's also certain physical expressions about them that everyone remembers and that are real touchstones to their personality. And this especially comes to mind with my mother-in-law, who passed a year ago in February, and she was 91. She lived a wonderful life. She didn't have to go into assisted living until maybe the last 6 months of her life. And I loved this story, and I loved telling this story about her because she expressed herself in her style and in how she comported herself to the very end. So much so that when she got on hospice, the hospice nurse asked her permission and the permission of her loved ones if she could be a poster child for hospice care, because she just was so stylish and so put together and so cute. And I loved that story about her. She took great delight in it. Her daughter took great delight in it. I did. She was never without her large statement earrings. She was seldom ever without her Revlon apple polish lipstick. She just had certain signature touches that were so uniquely and personally hers. And when I expressed those things in the eulogy, everybody knew exactly what I was talking about. My kids, from a very young age, I would say, what makes you think of Mamu? And they would go like this, because she always had fun earrings on. So to me, it's all an expression of your style, your personality, and a degree of respect for yourself and for others. And it's just a way kind of to have fun. If it's not your shtick, I get it completely. There's no right or wrong answer. But for me, it's my number 2 thing that makes me feel more youthful and more energized. And that's caring about my appearance for myself and others. Now let's move on to number 3. Okay, well, I have to laugh about this one because it is the one I am most guilty of, and I am really working on it, I promise. And I think I've made some headway in the new year, and that is I need to quit whining, quit complaining. I'm not so bad about the grunting and groaning every time I get up and out of a chair, but those little expressions of old age that I think we fall into because we're not attentive to it. So my story on that one is that my first mother's mother, her name was Grandma Weigel, and we loved her, and God love her. She was grew up in the Depression, was an adult during the Depression, went through hard times, including the loss of her daughter. But God love her. She was a whiner, and she just really liked to whine and complain a lot. And we didn't see her very often, but whenever we went to see her, before we would get down to the grandma stuff, we'd have to go through her litany of complaints and health issues and all of those kinds of things. And so we laugh about it, my brothers and sisters and we laugh about it. And I think I can remember, and it's similar to, remember when you were young and you wanted to get older faster, and you wanted to be an adult faster, and so you would emulate your parents in some regards. So Stuart, do you remember when you started drinking coffee? When you first started drinking coffee, it wasn't something you really liked or whatever, but it made you feel more like an adult, and you were kind of copying your parents, and there was there was a commonality there. There was a love connection there. There was an umbilical cord thing because you wanted to be an adult too. So you started drinking coffee, and eventually you just got used to it and you got habituated to it. Well, I have found that making old age noises and complaining is the same thing. So I can remember my dad, every time he would get up and out of his dad chair, he would grunt and he would groan when he'd sit back down, and he would make all of these noises. He'd creak or those kinds of things. And he would let the whole world know that he was sitting up, or he was sitting down, or he was standing up, and he was getting older. And I noticed that for a while I started doing that same thing, just partly because I was emulating my parents and kind of copying them, like, oh, now we're getting old too. But you start doing that, starting out in kind of an ironic and a funny way, and before you know it, you're habituated to it, and you do it just as a matter of course. So every time you stand up or every time you sit down, you make a little grunt or a groan or some kind of expression of discomfort, just because we're all getting older. And that's all fine and good, but there's a limit to those expressions of groaning. And my dad used to do it. I notice my husband does the same thing. And it's like making a pronouncement every time you stand up or sit down that you're old or getting older. So I think, as an expression of more youthful purportment, that every time you sit up and you bend down or whatever, you don't need to make a physical noise. I'm probably going to get a lot of pushback on this one, Stuart, but I have found it very true. Likewise, when I whine about everything, I'm always whining about, I'm so cold. Well, I'm sorry, that just probably makes me appear older and more fragile, and I don't need to do that. I don't need to complain so much when my stomach hurts or whatever. And I just don't need to complain and whine so much in general, because I have found that as we get older, we tend to do that. And here is another more recent example of that really brought this home to me. I was working out in the front yard, and people drive by in their cars. They're always stopping. They're always visiting. Sometimes I know them and sometimes I don't. But fairly recently, last fall, someone drove by, and this particular person I hadn't happened to have seen in probably 15 or 20 years and had not spoken to him. And it was an old boyfriend. They came by and I visited with him, and I won't go into anything about how he had aged physically or anything along those lines, his hairline, his waistline, or anything like that. But I will say that after talking to him for about 20 minutes, I thought to myself, boy, I don't remember you being such a curmudgeon, because every single topic I brought up, he would have some kind of Debbie Downer remark about, something unhappy or something unpleasant. Even if it was about pleasant things like his beautiful daughters or things like that, everything, there was some kind of detracting statement, and he just came off as just an old poopy curmudgeon. And I remember thinking, okay, maybe that was a little bit more attractive when you're young and in your 20s and 30s, and it comes off as kind of hip and cynical, but it just comes off as like a grumpy old man when you're older. So I know this person doesn't watch any of this kind of media, but that really brought it home to me that, sometimes you just don't have to put the worst spin on everything. Sometimes it makes the other person feel better if you acknowledge something that may be bad, but then you try to find some kind of redemption in the conversation. So, Stuart, do you agree with me on this at all? And this one in particular, I really would like to know your thoughts on. So that is not only how we carry ourselves, but how we communicate about ourselves and communicate with others. So now let's move on to number 4. Okay, this fourth one I'm going to make kind of brief because I think the words say it all, and that is to remain interesting, remain interested. And again, my mother-in-law, my mom, my second mom, they were brilliant about this. They were constantly interested in new things, what the latest tennis shoes were, what skincare product I was using, what book was I reading. If they were reading an article about something, my mom would immediately look it up, or if there was a word she didn't know, she would immediately look it up in the dictionary and then let whoever was in her midst share that information, because she just was kind of interested in everything. So I think my number 4 tip is just remain curious, and the more curious you remain, the more attractive you are to other people, because they know then that when you talk to them, you're curious about them as well. Well, number 5 is something that it's not just something that we attain at the end. One of my favorite expressions is happily ever after happens one day at a time. And I think all of life is just kind of a journey and happens one day at a time. And every day, hopefully, we're just a little bit wiser than we were the day before. So those of you that are in your 40s are probably wiser than your friends in your 30s. And those of you in your 50s, likewise. So I think there's always a value to constant learning and constant surrounding yourself with people from multiple generations, because multiple generations have different kinds of wisdom. Not all wisdom is born of having lived for a long time, but is born of life experiences. So to stay young and energetic, expose yourself to people of all age groups. One way that I have started doing this is because there's a large creative community in Oklahoma City, of which Stuart is a part. Some of the graphic designers I work with are a part of that. Most of them are younger, but it's a wonderful creative community, artistically, graphically, musically, and I tend to seek out those kinds of venues and events that will put me in touch with people of all different age groups and different disciplines. And so one of the things I love most about what Stuart and I do is that we work with people of all different age groups and backgrounds. And I love that because it helps us continually learn. We continually read. We continually try to learn something, even if it's fumbling through how to use a new app or something, which leads me to something else that I think is extremely difficult. To the extent possible, we need to learn to reduce our resistance to change. And I am very guilty of that because I don't like things to change. So I'm dealing with a number of issues in my life where things are changing. One of them being the climate in which I garden. And I'm really having a hard time dealing with that. But trying to deny it does no one any good, especially my garden. And so I'm trying to be a little bit less resistant to change, a little bit more adaptive, and a little bit more resilient. Am I that way every day? No. Is it a destination? No, it's a journey. So all of these things are just little different pick-me-ups that we can try to do on our good days so that it makes us feel less down on our bad days. So for whatever it's worth, you guys, those are just 5 tips that I try to think through to help me stay younger, feel younger, and be more energetic as I age. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Well, if you've held on this long, here is your comfy, cozy fashion epilogue for today, because it is bitter cold out and very, very windy, so I'm inside for the day. My earrings have kind of a Spanish vibe to them. I have these in both gold and silver tone. I can't remember really where I got them. I've had them for so long, but I love them. Just love statement earrings in general. My top is a really old boat neck J. Crew cashmere sweater sweater that I got at the outlet mall in Dillon, Colorado 100 years ago. My breeches, they are soft and kind of velveteen. I got these at Nordstrom Rack. These are from Topshop. They're kind of those wide leg, really comfy, cozy ones, but I love them because they have pockets. So anything that has pockets is just a quantum leap in terms of coziness to me. And my shoes, I think I got them from Nordstrom Rack or Amazon, and they are Mark Fisher. And they're just flats. Usually I have on my thick socks, but I'm kind of running in and out for a number of different reasons today. So there you go. There is my fashion epilogue for today.